How do you define morality?
Wait, that's a wonderful question. Did he harm the environment intentionally? Did he harm it on purpose? And in that case, people overwhelmingly say yes, clearly he did it intentionally.
So if something good happens, people don't want to associate it with the intention of the person, but something bad happens, they want to deeply associate it with the intention of the person. Why do you think people do it? So if you see the impact, you react. If you don't see the impact, you don't react, even though what you don't see might be more impactful, actually, I
Wait,
guess.
that's really interesting.
They're not dumb. They're not like dumb computers. They overreact. Sometimes they don't understand. And then also they react because they don't know how things are going to affect them.
People watch scary movies when they're not scared and they want to feel scared. But sad art isn't like scary movies. Like when people are listening to sad music, it's not because they want to feel sad. It's because they already do feel sad. You're thinking about violence, that it's not that someone tells you that violence is bad.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we have Joshua Knobe joining us to discuss a very interesting topic regarding morality and the intentional morality, particularly. Joshua is a philosopher and an experimental philosopher, and he teaches philosophy in Yale University, where he also teaches cognitive philosophy, cognitive science. He has done his PhD from Princeton University and has been associated with some other universities as well. Joshua, please welcome to the podcast.
It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for taking time out. So, Joshua, the topic today is around morality and particularly intentional morality, as well as there is a lot of research work you have done around it, and which is also popularly known as Knobe Effect itself. Right, so probably we'll go deeper into that. But before we go deeper into that, I think we should start with very simple question like, as a philosopher, how do you define morality?
Wait, that's a wonderful question. So, as a general rule, philosophers haven't really managed to define anything. Like, if you consider any question, like how do you define, I don't know, a chair? How do you define a wall? We're not really able to define any of these things. So, it's not as though we're going to offer a definition of the word morality. But when we think about morality, there do seem to be certain kinds of specific things about it that make it different from other kinds of value systems that we might have or other things that we might value. So, we might, for example, think it's also valuable for people to be pretty and it's valuable for people to be morally good. And you can see some real differences between the two of them. There's this sense with moral goodness that we have a kind of obligation to do things that are morally good. We can't sort of weigh that against other things. We can't wonder whether something else outweighs it. If we learn that something's morally wrong, we're just supposed to not do it. There's a sense about morality that it differs from other things and that it's related in a specific way to punishment. That when we think that someone did something morally wrong, we might punish them in a way that we wouldn't punish them if they did something that was wrong in some other way, say aesthetically bad or not very much fun or something like that. There are these sort of hallmarks of morality that make it different from other kinds of values that we might have.
Interesting. I think I will buy that point that let's not define anything because then you are bound by the definition. Probably we should go with a perceived sense of morality when what we kind of, in general, what we mean by morality when, in society, how, what that term implies. And probably that will make the discussion easier. So, morality is a pretty subjective topic in a way, but at the same time, the moral behavior, right? When you say this behavior is moral or immoral, and when we go deeper into that, people kind of, based on their culture, their background, have a lot of differences, right? And you have also done a bit of an experiment there where, you discovered few very interesting insights about the way people kind of exhibit that morality, right? In different circumstances. Would you like to elaborate a bit on that? What exactly was that experiment? And what was your insights?
Wait, which experiment are you, tell me a little bit more. Which experiment are you wondering about?
The Knobe effect, which the
Oh,
popularly
I
called.
see. So, sorry. So this is an experiment about the way that people's moral judgments impact other things that you might think have nothing to do with morality. So a lot of times we're just making judgments about whether one thing caused another, or whether something is, large or small, or whether it comes from your true self, or what someone values, or whether someone's happy. You might think that these things don't have anything to do with morality, they're just completely objective questions. But in a series of studies, we found that people's judgments about all of these things that seem like they have nothing to do with morality can actually be pushed around by people's moral judgments in certain ways. One example of this that I think is the one you're thinking about is judgments about whether someone did something intentionally. So I'll just give you two stories that will sort of illustrate this. They're going to be extremely similar to each other, and they're going to differ in just one way. And then hopefully you'll see that morality is having an effect on something you wouldn't think morality would affect at all. So in the first story, imagine the vice president of a company goes to the CEO and says, okay, we've got this new policy. It's going to make huge amounts of money for our company, but it's also going to harm the environment. And the CEO thinks about it and he says, look, I don't care at all about harming the environment. All I care about is just making as much money as we possibly can. So let's implement the policy. So they implement the policy, and then sure enough, it ends up harming the environment. And then participants are just asked, did he harm the environment intentionally? Did he harm it on purpose? And in that case, people overwhelmingly say yes, clearly he did it intentionally. And if you ask them why, a lot of them say, well, the reason why is that we know he knew he was going to harm the environment, and he went ahead and did it anyway. But we thought maybe there's something more going on here, that there's some other factor affecting people's judgments other than just the fact that he knew he was going to harm the environment. So to test this, we just gave people the exact same story, except now changing the word harm to help. So everything's just going to be word for word the same. We're just going to replace the word harm with help. So now it goes like this. The vice president of the company goes to the chairman of the board and says, we've got a new policy. It's going to make huge amounts of money for our company, and it's also going to help the environment. And then the chairman of the board says, look, I know it's going to help the environment, but I don't care at all about that. All I care about is just making as much money as we possibly can. So let's go ahead and implement this policy. So implement the policy, and sure enough, it ends up helping the environment. And the question is, did he help the environment intentionally? And in that case, people tend to say yes. They say, he did help the environment intentionally. Now, what seems so surprising about that is that you might think whether you did something intentionally just should depend on what you knew was going to happen, what you wanted to happen, things like that. But in this case, we see it being affected by whether something is good or bad. That the only difference between the two cases is whether you did something good or did something bad. And it's that difference that's somehow affecting people's judgments about whether he did it intentionally or unintentionally.
Very, very interesting. So basically, the same question. Essentially, what I understand is some people go to the CEO, and the CEO is taking decisions probably with the same mindset, whether it is harming the environment or it is helping the environment. But when it harms the environment, all the audience believes that he did it deliberately, intentionally harmed the environment for making money. But when these actions of the CEO helped the environment, people thought that, oh, the help happened naturally. He did not intend to help the environment. And so basically, whether he did something intentionally or unintentionally was being judged upon by the results of his actions. Okay, that's what is happening here, right? Essentially, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere.
Yeah, that somehow the difference between good and bad, which you might think bad versus good wouldn't affect whether you did it intentionally. Whether you did it intentionally is just about what's going on in your mind when you did it. Somehow, this value judgment, bad versus good, is affecting judgments about whether he did it intentionally or unintentionally.
And why do you think that happens? Like people are too, like say, if something good happens, people don't want to associate it with the intention of the person. But something bad happens, they want to deeply associate it with the intention of the person. Why do you think people do it? Did you go deeper into that also?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe one kind of first step into thinking about that question is to recognize it really doesn't seem to be anything that has to do with this one concept, the concept of doing something intentionally in particular. It feels like what we're seeing is something much larger, a much, much larger thing that happens in all sorts of different cases. And we're just seeing the particular effect of it on judgments about whether someone did something intentionally, but you can also get that same effect for all sorts of other things that have nothing to do with whether you did it intentionally. It seems like people's judgments about certain questions of value affect people's judgments about all sorts of other kinds of questions. So I don't know, maybe I'll give a different example and it will just sort of help to illustrate the same point. So consider a different question, and this time it's not going to be about whether someone did something intentionally. It's going to be about whether someone caused something. So suppose that the receptionist in, say, the philosophy department keeps her desk stocked with pens. So she has all these pens around, and then she says, okay, here's the rule. The administrative assistants are allowed to take a pen whenever they want. Like if they just need to use a pen, they can take one. But the professors aren't supposed to take a pen. They're supposed to buy their own pens. So she keeps sending them out these angry messages. Guys, stop taking the pens. These pens are just for the administrative assistant. Now, one day, suppose that Professor Smith and the administrative assistant are both walking by the pens at the same time. There are two pens on the desk. And at the same moment, then the administrative assistant takes a pen, just like she's supposed to. And then Professor Smith also takes a pen, but she's violating the rule. She's not supposed to take a pen. So then they both take pens and then they just walk away. Then a few minutes later, The receptionist needs a pen to take an important message, but she has a problem. There's no pens left on the desk. So who caused the problem? The administrative assistant or the professor? And in that case, people overwhelmingly say the professor caused the problem and the administrative assistant didn't cause the problem. So here, this second story that I gave, it doesn't in any way involve doing anything intentionally or something like that. The question isn't did she do it on purpose? The question is just did she cause it? But we're seeing the exact same effect arising. Maybe if I give a couple more cases, it will help to illustrate the basic point. But it feels like whatever was going on in that first case with helping or harming the environment, it's not like just some little thing that has to do with the quirks of judgment of whether you did something intentionally. I felt like that was just like the tip of the iceberg, that there are all these other effects that have that same kind of structure.
Very, very interesting. I think the other example is even more easier to kind of understand. Basically, two people are doing the same thing, but one is being held responsible probably because of the background that has been built already. Like the professor is not supposed to take the pen, the assistant is supposed to take the pen. So if the two pens are out and professor has also taken the pen, he will be considered a bad actor here because there was already a story, a background that has already been planted in the minds of the people. Like this guy is not supposed to take, even though in their own mind, the professor or the assistant they don't intend to harm anybody. They just wanted a pen and they took a pen. Both have exactly same intentions and exactly same nature, but one will be perceived as causing an effect and one will be perceived as doing something normal of, let's say, whatever her routine was.
You know that you were, it seems like you were thinking maybe you're to blame for the problem that results. But a really interesting fact about this effect is that it also arises when the outcome is something good or neutral or something like that. So suppose it ended up being good that there were no pens left on the desk. Like for example, suppose that the receptionist was in a murderous rage against the chair of the department. She was going to take a pen and just stab his eye out with the pen. But then she couldn't because there were no pens left on the desk. And now we're wondering who brought about this good outcome? Who saved the life of the chair? And in that case, people still say the person who did something bad. So they'd still say the professor caused the good outcome and not the administrative assistant.
Okay,
So it's not, I don't know if this helps deepen the study of
okay,
this, but it's not that people just think
okay,
the one who does something bad causes outcomes that are
okay.
bad. The one who does something bad is seen as more the cause of any
Okay,
outcome.
very interesting. So I think what is happening here is like if something huge is happening, right, then people would want to find a cause and effect. And they always believe that things cannot happen neutrally. There must be a reason why something has happened. And they are forcing a reason, even though there is no proper, probably there is not so much of an impactful reason actually existing, but they don't want to see an outcome without a cause. And
They
cause is
don't want to
something,
see anything that's no cause. Yeah, keep
right?
going.
And so they want to find out the cause of it. And generally, whatever seems natural, they will not associate that as a cause. Something more has to happen, or something more, as you mentioned, right? Pre-built up. If there is a pre-build up, right, then probably they would want to associate that with the cause because that's what they know, right? They have been fed in a way that professor should not take the pen. Professor should not take the pen. It's like a propaganda in a way where they have been fed with some propaganda, and then they were more likely to kind of believe that though since I was already told that this professor taking the pen is a bad thing, and then there is a bad outcome also, then this guy must be responsible for that, even though he has not done anything.
And you're thinking it has something to do with our understanding of kind of what's natural. That
Mm-hmm.
certain things are just the natural way stuff is, and other
Mm.
things aren't natural. They seem kind of weird or going against what's natural. And then we tend to think if something's just natural, it's not the cause of anything. It's the things that aren't
Right.
natural. Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, I'm saying that if something is happening, I want to find out a cause. And if I am an emotional person, right, very quick to judge, probably I don't want to take a complete, I do not understand things in wholesome way. I just, whatever I've been fed, right, whatever information is there, if I can connect it somehow, even if it's a loose connection, there is a possibility that I would kind of try to, blame that connection as the actual cause when in reality it might not be. As I mentioned, just how propagandas are built up, right? First, they plant a cause, and then there is an effect of that propaganda. And people always believe that that propaganda was true, right? In a way, it seems to be linking that particular aspect of it.
Wait,
For
wait,
example,
keep going with it.
let's
Wait,
say
keep going with the thing about propaganda. Can
the
you say more about
propaganda
it? You're
thing, in the
saying
sense, if you think about this, how the way Hitler and all the guys created, they planted this message that Jews were responsible for the world war being lost, right? First, they losing the world war. They gave this propaganda, right? And even though there may or may not be any connection, but if the idea has been fed, right, you in your mind, you cannot think neutrally, right? So whenever there is an idea in your mind, you are unable to think neutrally in that case, right? So you always keep associating, oh, this I was given this information must be having some meaning, right? So I think people are trying to overthink in a way because once you have something in your mind, right? Once you get a reason, you neutral. That's a normal human behavior, I guess.
wait, that's really helpful though. Once you start, so you're thinking, once you start having this thing in your mind,
Right,
you're thinking that must be related to something. And you,
right,
instead of
right.
thinking, you're thinking,
Correct.
Wait, maybe I'll give you one third example, and then I don't know if it'll help. Then, if you consider the three different examples, but helping or harming the environment depends on the task. Now I'll give another example. So this one is about what it is for something to be innate. So innate means it's not something you learned or like you got from your environment. It's some trait that's just built into you by your genes, by the way that you are biologically.
Mm,
Okay, so imagine there's this trait. It's because we're not going to tell you what trait it is. We'll just call it trait X. Okay, so here's the way trait X works. Is that our genes are such that if our parents ever treat us nicely, then we're going to develop trait X. That's how our genes work. Our genes work in such a way that if your parents ever treat you nicely, then you develop trait X. But everyone's parents treat them nicely at least sometimes. So everyone in the whole world has trait X. So then the question is trait X innate? And in that case, I don't know if you feel it, but most people say yes. Most people say in that case, trait X is innate. Okay, now let's consider a different case. Imagine there's this trait, it's called trait X. And here's how it works. Our genes are such that if our parents are ever mean to us, we're going to develop trait X. But everyone's parents are mean to them at least sometimes. There's no one whose parents have never been mean to them their whole life.
right.
So everyone in the whole world has trait X. Is trait X innate? In that case, most people say no. Wait, so then, you know,
You know, the whole nature versus nurture debate, I think, has been flipped on its head by that one statement. Because so what happens is like when something good happens, it's by nature. When something bad happens, it's by nurture. Right? That's what it is coming out. Okay.
wait, that's helpful. In this case, wait, it's really close to that. Sorry, that there is evidence of that thing that you just said.
Mm,
This thing, it's not, it's, you don't know whether the thing that happened is good or bad because you just know it's trait X. You have
right,
no idea what X is.
right,
But
right.
it's when something, but it is close to that because it's like when something good happened, or something good in the environment was also necessary for it to happen. Then you say it's innate. But when something bad in the environment was also necessary for it to happen, people say it's not innate. But
Yeah,
you
because
know,
I think.
this isn't my own work, but there is evidence for the thing that you just
Mm,
said. This evidence is from Matt Lebowitz, Katie Taub, and colleagues, and what they find is that if people have morally good traits, people think maybe those traits are just built into them by human nature. But if
mm.
people have morally bad traits, people are very reluctant to think maybe it's just human nature to have bad traits. Like it's just in our nature to want to hurt other people or something. They think that must be the result of our environment.
And who knows, it might be true also in the sense that here we, because human beings have this belief that basically human beings are good beings overall at some level. It's only because some bad environmental influence or negative thinking is only responsible always for we behaving badly, right? So whenever something bad behavior happens, there must be a reason for that, and which is might be true also as such, But obviously, the way people connect it is not right because, as you mentioned in the professor's example, right? But that professor is a nice guy; he has not harmed anybody. But since this formula has taken up in our mind, right? Like when something bad happens, find a cause, there must be some guy. And the thing is, since we are quick on the judgment, we don't take the complete stock of the situation. Uh, the chances of being wrong is pretty high. And as we all just gave the example of this, right? If some idea is planted in your mind, right? You are prone to take the wrong judgment even more. So naturally, also we take wrong judgments. But if some idea has been planted in our mind, the probability of taking a wrong judgment kind of becomes exponential.
Wait, that's really helpful. I also really like the other thing that you were saying when you said maybe it's just our nature. People think it's just our nature to be good. If we could get rid of all of the external influences that are getting in the way of our just expressing our own nature, we'd be good.
Hmm,
And then just an unfortunate thing about life is that a lot of times there's just something that gets in the way of us expressing our nature.
right.
But people, I think, would very rarely think of it the other way. They wouldn't think it's just our nature to be bad. And then the
Right.
reason we're good is that there are these things that get in the way of our expressing our nature. I think, about that, I feel it even more extremely if I imagine not moral things, but certain kinds of other forms of excellence. Like, say someone is a truly great poet. I would never think, maybe deep down, and most fundamentally, they're actually a mediocre poet.
Mhm,
But something got in the way of them expressing their mediocrity, like something in the environment. And
mhm,
so they ended up creating truly great poems as a result of the external environment making them unable to write bad poetry. But the
mhm,
other way seems very intuitive. If someone's
right.
creating mediocre poems, you might
Mm.
think deep down they really have, there's something drawing them to be a great poet, but just something in the environment messed them up.
Basically, I think there was this other term in psychology, right? Is cognitive dissonance that whenever something output happens, right? We always end up finding a cause actually, even if there is no real cause, right? Because otherwise we are, how should I say, we feel disturbed if we cannot find a reason for something to happen, right? So even if we don't know the true reason, we often end up inventing a reason. Probably. It
Well,
sounds something
wait,
similar to that, right?
but wait, that thing you just said, you were just thinking, it seemed like you were saying we seek a reason for everything.
Right.
But is it that we seek a reason for everything that happens, or are you thinking especially for bad things that happen?
I think bad things, because good things happen that feels very natural to us, right? But if bad things happen, because if we look into our own minds, right, we want a good life, happy life, we want to be happy. So, but if it's hear this news about war and violence, right, which disturbs us and we don't feel it is natural, then we obviously start finding reasons for it, right? So generally, I think for negative things, we want to find reasons because it looks like something that should not have happened, which is happening. Personally, that's what I feel. But of course, it can be person to person.
Wait, that feels really interesting. Like, you know how you gave the example about losing World War One? That maybe people in Germany were like, why did we lose World War One? And they're
Mm,
seeking some cause.
correct.
Say something good happens that since World War Two, there's never been another World War. Then
Mm.
maybe people would think, I don't know, stuff just happens.
This is natural. War should not happen, right? Which
Yeah.
might as well be true, right? That war should not happen, probably, right? So only for unnatural things you want to find out a reason, like why this happened, why this thing happened, which should not have happened, right?
Wait, there's something really striking about that, that maybe when things are pretty good, you don't wonder why. I don't know, say if your parents are always really nice to you, you wouldn't think, why are my parents so nice to me?
Right, right.
But then,
It would start
if
feeling
something
natural to me.
terrible is,
Go ahead, go ahead.
oh, that you just,
I was saying, yeah, if my parents were always nice to me, I would definitely start feeling that is natural to me, unless I become aware about other friends whose parents are not so nice. And obviously, but if they're not nice, even that, if you're very small and not aware, probably that would also feel natural to you at some point of time. I don't know. And then you discover probably that was not the right way to be brought up. I know that's for the sake of fun. But yeah, please finish your point.
well, yeah, wait, that it feels really striking that maybe there's this difference, that when things are going wrong, you think, why is this happening? But when things are going right, you think, I don't know, stuff like
Mm.
that just happens sometimes.
I think because and it's a guess, okay. Because deep down, generally, people are human beings, particularly are good people, compassionate. They want good things to grow, good things to happen in life. When you go out in the nature, right, you enjoy the nature. So you always want the nature to be present out there, right? So when you hear all this news that, violence is happening, nature is being destroyed, the selfishness of man is kind of destroying the earth. Some people who are not so aware, who are too much money minded, probably they may not think about it, but someone who is simple, let's say, he would start thinking, like, this doesn't sound natural to me, there is something definitely going wrong here. And then he will start finding the reasons, right? Probably he will find the right reasons, probably he will find the wrong reasons. But if you find something which just doesn't look nice, which doesn't fit right in your own worldview, obviously it is natural to be inquisitive about why that happened, right?
Wait, that's really interesting that that we'd be inquisitive about that and not the other way. If you walk into a forest and it's so beautiful, you wouldn't think,
Actually,
why is
you
this?
wouldn't be inquisitive about it, but you would be at joy. You would feel natural about it. You would enjoy the kind of goodness of it, because there is nothing to inquire about it. It's natural, right?
Well, you just think, well, it's natural for it to be so beautiful, but you just enjoy it.
Yeah,
But then
correct.
if you came and everything was falling apart and like all the trees were dying,
Uh,
you'd think, why
yeah,
is this
because
happening?
because in a way, as I mentioned already, right? Uh, it feels unnatural when you see something like that happening, and you feel that is a part of you in a way, right? Nature is also a part of your life, a part of your upbringing, a part of your world, right? We belong to them and they belong to us. That's also one of the reasons, right? So when that gets destroyed, you feel like something which is a part of you is being destroyed, right? And something which is critical to you, which is essential to you for your livelihood, for your children, for your families, right? If that starts getting destroyed, obviously you get disturbed by it, right? Because your sense of security gets disturbed, your sense of peace gets disturbed because this, and then you obviously become inquisitive about it.
You know, I feel like there's something really interesting about what you're just suggesting here, that it feels like there's something about this notion of what it is for some state of the world to be natural. That we have this idea that there's some way things just naturally are, and then other ways that don't feel natural to us. That maybe, for example, you might feel Like, we all know that sometimes fathers abandon their own children, but we
Right.
might think, if your father isn't taking care of you as you're growing up, you're not growing up in the natural way. Of course, we know that happens, but it just doesn't, it feels like it goes against what's natural.
Right. I think, I
Well,
mean, and this is not even something that you get trained to, probably because, a lot of people have felt is like they're very sensitive about it in the sense that it's not like they have been educated into being or being told into that this is natural, this is not natural. They have this general natural tendency where they sense, right, that this is natural, this does not look natural. They can, and some people, so obviously different people have different level of sensitivity. I am not very sensitive, frankly, but I know many people who are extremely sensitive to behavior. If they say, let's say, a pet, right, who is not being taken care properly, they get disturbed by that also. So, and this disturbance is not like just for the sake of drama or because they've been told by many people that this is not natural. They have this thing innately, naturally built into it. So yes, I do feel that human beings have this capacity to sense what is natural and what is unnatural. Of course, they get heavily overloaded with a lot of information, a lot of bias, a lot of propagandas, as we were just discussing. But still, they retain this capability at some level to say what it looks natural and what looks unnatural, I believe.
wait, that's really helpful. And I feel like if you think about this idea we have about what's natural and what's not natural, it feels like it only applies to certain things and not others. It feels like we might say, it's not natural to abandon your own children, or it's not natural to be cruel to your spouse or something like that. It's not. But then there are other things where I feel like we wouldn't think that. Like, we wouldn't think about naturalness. So say you have some view about um what's the best fiscal policy is for, economic policies for the government.
Hmm.
So some people think the government should have high taxation and high redistribution, or low taxation and low redistribution.
Right,
But
right.
then it's the way that you think it's wrong, you wouldn't feel like that's unnatural.
Yeah, I think because too much maths, I think. And if I'm not good at maths, don't understand something, I will not have a view of it, right? I cannot sense, because you cannot sense that directly, right? That will come after, let's say, 1 year, the effect of an economic policy. So you don't know what's going to happen actually. So when some policies come or some kind of, let's say, economic policies or fiscal policies, whatever, right? Where five steps have to be taken and then something will happen. And if you don't have a lot of interest in economics, or if you're not that well read about it, and you cannot even predict it and probably will not even understand that economic policy deeply, then you will not be affected because you can't sense what's going to happen, right? But if a simple economic policy comes, okay, like whatever salary you are getting, 50% will be taken as a tax, okay, that you can sense immediately. And then all your
But then
natural
you feel, do you think
instincts,
you feel that that's not natural
right,
if
right.
that happens?
So even whether that is natural, not unnatural, you will react to it, right? Because you see the impact of it immediately, right? So so if you see the impact, you react. If you don't see the impact, you don't react, even though what you don't see might be more impactful, actually, I
Wait,
guess.
that's really interesting. And then it felt like what you were suggesting earlier was that when things are natural, when things seem natural to us, we don't even think, why did it happen? We're just like, oh,
Right,
no, it's just a natural way for things to be.
correct,
And it's only when things are not natural that we think, wait, why did that just happen? What is going on?
right. You know that,
Yeah, you're right. Like that, if you were
right.
being taxed at 50%, you might think, why?
Hmm.
But if you were taxed at a lower rate, you wouldn't think, "Well, why?" You just think, well, that's just how it goes.
Because you see, the basic thing is human beings are intelligent, right? They have thinking capabilities, they have sensing capabilities, right? And those capabilities, those systems act and react, right? Sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly, but they have this capability, right? They're not dumb. They're not like dumb computers or the lack of machines, essentially, right? Which cannot sense, which cannot. So human beings sense and they act and react, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, sometimes they overreact, sometimes they don't understand, and then also they react because they don't know how things are going to affect them. So if you see in the world, right, when some policies come, there will always be people who are for it and people who are against it. That itself implies that people don't completely understand it, right? because otherwise everybody should be on the same page. So, right, but that never happens, right? For every policy, every belief, there will be always be people on this side also and that side also, which means people, the way their mind has evolved or the way they perceive things is always going to be different based on their background or culture, or their capacity to understand certain things.
But wait, what you just said was if everyone correctly understood the policy, they would all be on the same side. They'd all be in
Correct.
favor, or they'd all be
Right,
voting.
right.
That's probably not true, right?
In fact, that's the next question that I wanted to bring. So, do you think there is any such thing as absolute morality? In the sense that, this is actually moral behavior and nobody would kind of question it because you have been into this field of morality from a long time, right? You have spent a lot of time there. So, do you ask this question? Because morality is very, very subjective, right? For some people, war may be absolutely moral, but for somebody who, let's say, comes from army background, that may be the highest morality, right? Because they are fighting for something they love. They're fighting first to protect something or protect an idea in which they deeply believe, right? So, do you think the whole idea of morality is always subjective, or it can ever be absolute also?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but the thing that I study is whether people think that there's an objective morality or whether people think there's not. A lot of people said, prior to really doing research on it, that people think that morality is objective. I mean, they might be wrong, but that's what people think, that there are objective moral truths. But in our studies, we find evidence against that. So we find that people don't seem to think that morality is completely objective. So I'll give you an example of one of our studies. So participants were told, imagine there's this person who lives in like New Jersey, and he just decides to just murder someone on the street randomly. And now suppose two different people have different opinions about that. So suppose you think that what he did is something morally wrong, but then see there's some other person like in your town who thinks the opposite. That other person thinks what the person did, there's nothing wrong with it. So then participants were asked, well, given that Pradeep and this other person have opposite opinions, does one of them have to be wrong, or could they just both be right? And in that first case, people say one of them has to be wrong. They can't both be right. So then a second condition was participants were told, imagine there's someone in New Jersey and he just randomly stabs someone on the street. Now, suppose you say that what he did is really wrong, that's terrible what he did. And now, suppose there's someone in the Amazon rainforest from this hunter-gatherer society, a really different culture from yours, where there's all these values of honor and very little of the kind of values that you might associate with the contemporary West or anything. Then this person says, well, there's nothing wrong with this, what this person did. It's totally fine. In that case, participants are asked, do you think that, given that Pradeep and this other person said opposite things, one of them has to be wrong, or could they both be right? And there people are right about the midpoint. So they don't say one of you has to be wrong. They don't say both of you both of you could be right. They're sort of in the middle. And then in the third condition, participants are told, okay, this guy stabs someone in New Jersey. You say it's morally bad. And now we'll imagine there are these extraterrestrial creatures, the Pentars. They just travel the universe trying to increase the total number of equilateral pentagons in the universe. So they don't care about love or friendship or helping others, any of that stuff. All they care about is just maximizing the total number of equilateral pentagons. And if one of them ever gets too old or tired to continue in this quest, then they just kill him and turn him into an equilateral pentagon himself. And none of them see anything wrong with this. So now, suppose that you say that what this person did was morally wrong, and one of the Pentars says, no, this is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Does one of you have to be wrong, or could you both be right? In that case, people just say, you could both be right. So we seem to be seeing in these results is that ordinary folks, don't really seem to be thinking there's this objective moral truth such that if anyone disagrees with it, then that person just has to be mistaken.
Very, very interesting. In fact, I was thinking about, coming back to the definition of morality, what is moral behavior, right? So if I believe in something and I act as per that belief, then in my mind, I'm a moral person, right? Or in my mind, anyone who acts in a manner which fits my belief, then in my mind, that behavior is moral, right? So it always goes down to beliefs. Morality has something to do deeply with beliefs, I guess. Beliefs and, whatever, it can be religious belief or it can be just human values. So if you have learned to believe in something, and if some behavior is conforming to that belief, you will always say that is moral, right? So that's what it is coming out to be, that belief and morality go together. And if someone has different sets of beliefs, he will have different idea of morality. And then of course there is the way you live naturally. For example, you give example of that, let's say in the rainforest, some people are living, right? Their way of life, right? To which, for example, if they, let's say, kill animals for eating, right? Some people may find that immoral, some people may find it moral, but for them it might be very, very natural, just like almost animals, right? They kill other animals to eat, right? It's not immoral for them, it's natural to them, right? So yeah, it's a very different and difficult kind of question. And I think it's all about a state of mind. Eventually, like in your state of mind, what do you believe in? What sounds natural to you? And probably it's also a good point to start asking, like questioning your own beliefs also, probably. Like, if I believe in something, is that driven by truth, or is it belief, just, I think, yeah, that's a good point. If whatever you believe in, is that belief driven by truth or in facts? Or is it because of simply that example we gave, right, where propaganda, specifically, for the sake of a better word, someone has planted that idea in your mind and that has become a belief? Or is it something that you have sensed naturally? Probably the chances of that being true might be better, right?
Oh, so you're wondering, wait, you're thinking different moral beliefs we have might be different. Some are people propagandizing us to believe something, and others are the thing that humans just by nature find
Right, right.
to be good or bad.
Because let's say violence, right? Let's say to some extent, every human being feels that violence is not right, right? They do violent behavior in certain circumstances. If you ignore that, right? In general, naturally, people will not want to be violent, right? Because it is something they have sensed, right? Violence is painful, violence is hateful, all those things. So there is this belief-based things, which in your mind, and then there is also truth-based movement, right? Where something which is actually truth, and if you can sense it, right, with your heart and mind, right, you apply both of them, that also would lead you to something, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, so you're thinking about violence, that it's not that someone tells you that violence is bad.
Hmm.
It's that it just is bad and you sense that.
Right, right. That's exactly what the point is. Like, if you apply all those sensibilities, right, probably you would come to that conclusion naturally, and nobody has to tell you what is moral behavior. And probably that means that we should not accept any behavior as moral just because somebody has told us.
Okay. Oh, wait,
Right?
that's helpful. I just want to explore that thing you said just a little bit further. Imagine like there are different things that people believe in 2025. Some of them they believe because of just something about human nature, kind of the way humans are, that they would believe that. And certain things they believe because, oh, a kind of process of learning that took place over millennia. It's not at all about human nature. Then do you think we should more think the first kind of thing is true and the second thing is false than the other way?
See, what I am arriving at is like there is a human nature, right? As you just as the word you use. And to me, if some action conforms to human nature, deep human nature, okay, not just propagandized human nature. Okay. So if something which I feel, which I know for a truth, not because I've been told, but I've actually sensed it, felt it, and then there is a action which conforms to that behavior, I would say that is moral. Moral is just a word. You can say whatever you want, right? So if I have sensed something deeply and if that behavior kind of I observe, I will say it is moral. But if I have not sensed it and somebody performs that behavior, and probably I would say that it's immoral, for the lack of a better word.
Wait, see, you're thinking that the things that conform to our human nature tend to be more.
Yes, exactly. That's my point is. And that human nature, if you think about it, has been perverted by beliefs, because beliefs are not always based on truth.
Can we explore that a little bit more? You might think there's certain bad things about human nature, that
Because
it's
because the
our
whole
human
idea
nature
of
to be.
belief, if you think about beliefs, right, we only believe into something when we don't know it for a fact, right? If I know something, there are some facts, why would I have a belief around it? I know it's for a fact, right? I can only believe that Earth is flat when I don't know that, Earth is circle, right? But if I go out and I see the sun rises in the east, I would never believe that sun rises in the west, right? So if I can see something, then it's a fact. If I don't know, then only I get into this idea of beliefs, right?
That's helpful, but can I ask about the connection to human nature? So it seemed like you were suggesting that insofar as we're acting on our human nature, then we're not going to be morally bad. I wonder what you think. It seems you might think there are certain aspects of our human nature that are bad. You might think it's part of our human nature to feel jealous of other people's success.
Okay, like that. So I would say,
It's part of our nature to be.
very that's a very good topic, and from what I have understood till now, for my own research, little bit here and there. Okay, so what has happening is when thinking enters into relationship, right? That's when I think all these things start. When you start thinking about relationships. So if you think about jealousy, fear. It is essentially thought, right? And you're thinking, right? Why that person is looking better than me, and why there is thinking always going on. So thinking is that perversion which perverts human nature. If you think about it deeply, and that's where I think all the disturbance starts when you start thinking too much, overthinking essentially, right? That's what my research is about. So all the perversion, all the immoral behavior, so to say, is created by thought.
So if we were more thoughtless, we would be
If
have
you
a
are
better.
not heartless, but if you're overthinking, that would definitely lead to immoral behavior. Because what do you think about it, right? You always think about comparisons. You always think about bad things most of the time, right? Like, oh, why, why am I lonely? Why is that guy better than me? Why am I not as successful to him? All these things have nothing but products of thought, right? So all jealousy, all the envy, all the fear is planted by thought, right? So thought is that one, how should I say, element that always makes our behavior unnatural to an extent. And if you think about it, last few decades, right, thought has been given a lot of importance, right? If people are capable of thinking a lot, it's considered a good thing. So people don't realize that thinking is actually also causing a lot of bad things when it enters into relationships, particularly.
Wait, that's good. So you're thinking, the a core role of thinking is that it makes us dissatisfied.
Thinking makes us, because when you're thinking, you're not paying attention in a way, if you think about it. If you're thinking, it's always about yourself, not the object or what is happening in front of you, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's what I have researched, and that's what I also feel that is true, that if you're thinking, you are always not seeing the truth. You're always seeing it from a perspective of what you want, what you get, what you did not get, your past, right? So it meddles with the facts always. But if you're just paying pure attention, you are then probably attention is not the same as thinking, is what I feel. Paying attention, right, is not same as thinking about something.
But it's and so if you think about a dog or something like that, the
If you see a
dog
dog,
will
right,
be
and
off.
if you and you just observe his behavior, his actions, right, you will feel a sense of joy. But if you start thinking about it, like, why is this dog here? Why this dog is this color and not that color? You start thinking about all that, all the comparisons you start doing. Then
Yeah,
you kind of get perverted, right? And the truth gets perverted by that, and then you don't pay attention.
that's beautiful. Well, it does seem like maybe there are certain features of our society that make us think more or less, and then we can
Right,
look at
correct.
what the impact of those is on people's happiness.
Right, yeah. I think on that note, I think, Joshua, I would like to kind of take a few minutes to understand, like, what's the current work that you're going on with, and what is your current interest, and then we can probably wrap up this
Well,
discussion.
right now I'm actually working on why people like sad art. So, a lot of times when people, for example, are listening to music, they're drawn to music that makes them feel bad. That people like art that's sad, that makes them feel terrible. But what is it that's doing that? Why are we drawn to sad art? That's the question I'm working on right now.
I think because people feel disturbed and they want to find out the answer to that.
Well, right, that they feel sad, and then it's their own sadness that draws them to sad art.
Right, correct, correct, correct.
I really agree, and I think that that's a really big difference between, for example, sad art and the scary art.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you consider watching scary movies, like horror movies,
Mm,
people don't watch scary movies because they're scared. Like,
right.
people watch scary movies when they're not scared and they want to feel scared. But sad art isn't like scary movies. Like, when people are listening to sad music, it's not
Mm.
because they want to feel sad. It's because they already do feel sad. It's their own sadness that's drawing them
Yeah,
to listen to
that's
sad
true,
music.
because most of the time people are like heartbroken or something like that, right? At that time they will hear all the sad music and all. So yeah, that's true actually. When they are already sad, then the possibility of hearing sad music is way higher than when they are feeling happy and normal, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, ignore that word normal. I mean, when you are in good mood, you will not feel like watching a sad movie for sure.
Right, and then the opposite is true with being scared, right? I think if you actually were scared, you wouldn't want to watch a scary movie then. You want
Right,
to watch a
right.
scary movie when you're not scared.
Correct, correct, correct. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. Yeah, that's a subtle but important difference, I think. You're not scared, you will watch a scary movie because you want something exciting. But if you're not
yeah,
sad, you will not want to watch sad movie, because sad movie is not exciting. It's a different kind of movement. I mean,
yeah, that's really right.
very interesting. Interesting. And so this is the current thing that you're working on right now? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we were trying to understand what what is it about sad art that people like more than sad things that are not art? Suppose like I was feeling really sad and either I created, a poem about it or something like that, or I just told you, hey, I'm feeling really sad.
Okay.
Then if I just told you that wouldn't seem good. You wouldn't enjoy hearing me just tell you how sad I am. But if I created a work of art about it, then you would feel that. And what we find in our studies is that that's true even if you perfectly match the actual creation itself. So if, say, I write some words and it says either that I just wrote them in my journal because that's just what I was feeling,
Hmm.
or I wrote it as a work of art, then people like it much more. They like sad art much more when it's described as having the purpose to be art. I don't know if this will help you to see why this is puzzling, but the thing that's really striking about that is that at first you might think, well, the reason people prefer sad art to people just saying something sad about their life is that they think that if someone says something sad about their life, it's true that there really is some problem in their life. But if it's a work of art, like say a song, then it might not be true. But in reality, in our studies, no one thinks that. If you write a sad song, no one thinks, I don't know, maybe you just felt like writing a sad song. Everyone thinks it's completely true. Like if you wrote a song about having a drug addiction, no one would think, maybe he just thought it would be fun to write a song about having a drug addiction.
Right,
Everyone thinks the reason you wrote the song is because you have a drug addiction.
right,
But
right,
then they
right.
still enjoy it more than if you just said, I have a drug addiction.
Very, very interesting. Okay, interesting. Okay, I would wait for the result for of your this research to come out.
Awesome.
Yeah, because as we were discussing, right? Because some of these insights are very interesting because as we were discussing on this point of propaganda, right? Because people can easily get fooled by some of preconceived notions and thoughts, and they start jumping onto these judgments, right? And sometimes these are harmless, but sometimes this can also be harmful, right? Because you may kind of start questioning somebody who has not done anything, and you know. But if you understand this concept, like, hey, probably you are jumping to conclusions just because you're wired like that in a way, right? Then probably you
Yeah.
will withhold your actions, and you will also, and that also gives us a criteria, right? Let's say there is a court and there is a judge. It's okay for police and politicians to be a bit, you know, jerky in their behavior, but the judge, right? He should have that capacity to be neutral, right? Even if he believes or feels like this guy's true and this guy's false, he should not go with his beliefs because beliefs can be wrong. But he should always wait for clues, hints, right? Proofs. So these kind of insights are very useful, probably. And the way the world is right now, right? A lot of things are in chaos anyway. Probably, you know,
Yeah.
philosophers like you or psychologists, right, who are doing a lot of great work and come out and show that why people are behaving certain way, and it would kind of help people mend their own behaviors, understand themselves as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Okay, okay, Joshua. Thanks for discussion. It was very fun discussion,
It
and
was
kind
great
of
talking with you.
thanks for your time. Thanks for taking the time out, and I had great fun. I hope people who are watching this also would enjoy and kind of, if you guys, what is your idea of morality and what is your idea of intentions? Do let us know in the comments. Probably it would be fun to go through them. And what do you think about Joshua's work? Feel free to connect with him also and kind of, now that you know what he's doing, right? And let's just have a small discussion or something around it so that we can continue on that. And that's all that I had to say. Thanks for your time, Joshua. Have a nice day.
Great talking with you.